The floor is yours.
Sergio, thank you all for coming. And Sergio, I want to clarify, leader of a think tank does not mean the FTF. You are the leader of the think tank here. That was the Center for Business Innovation at Ernst & Young. Anyhow, open innovation. In one sense, a very simple idea. This is Bill Joy, chief scientist at Sun Microsystems in the 80s and 90s, and of course Bill Gates. And Bill Joy, in reaction to Microsoft, made a very clear statement. He said, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for somebody else, because how many people can you have working for you? And so he was a proponent of looking outside of your enterprise for people with different mindsets and people really smart who didn't work for you. And he said that was in reaction to Bill Gates' point of view that Microsoft was an IQ monopolist. So no one is an IQ monopolist, right? So at the most fundamental level, that's what open innovation is about. Where do you get your ideas, your knowledge, your skills to make innovation happen? So that was, as I said, around 1990, these were said, and at that point, think of your own network experience. It was either a corporate network or a telephone, primarily, right? Maybe you had a cell phone. So let's use your cell phone. Let's use the greater penetration of networks. Can you please take out your smartphone? Everybody here have a smartphone? Is anyone here without a smartphone? There is two, I see. So your voices will not be heard in this poll. And would you go to, good point, to pollev.com/fundacion INN876. So we'll ask a simple question here to begin with. Oh, you need to, can we see the question? Are you familiar with, have you heard before of the concept open innovation? Just yes or no question. We should have made some bets.
We should have.
Yeah.
But I'd have lost.
Me too. But we'd have lost twice, I think. So a little less than half. Well, moving up toward half. All right? Let's just go to the next question. 56 to 44. Whoa, something happened. All right, that's probably because we're using a free account. Let's ask a second question, which is in each of your areas of responsibility, whatever that might be. Do any of you have something going on, some activity that you would call open innovation? So it looks like around three quarters of the people who've heard of it are doing something with it, so that's good. Good, well that helps us, gives us a starting point from which to gauge how to talk about this. And I think we'll move on and start talking about how companies are learning to use the smart people who don't necessarily work for them. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint, please. Okay. I want to tell you what I was doing last week for a minute. This was on my screen. It's what IBM calls a jam, a business jam. And this one was about the Internet of Things. And people, maybe you've read something about that in the newspapers when we connect every device Every lamp, every thermostat, every automobile is connected to the internet so it can be read and diagnosed and possibly repaired and commanded remotely. So IBM has for at least 5 years been talking about a smarter planet, right? They almost invented this idea, at least in the public market. But they have chosen to ask the world how to do it and what it will be like. So I know this is hard to read, but this is rear projection, so I can't use the laser. Okay, up at the top left it says welcome Chris Meyer, because they invited me to this, gave me a URL, and this is called a Business of Things Jam. Thousands of people are invited from all over the world, just for, I think it was 52 hours. So 2 days across time zones. And they had 3 forums. What are the operational models, the organizational models, and the industry models? And those were forums. And everybody contributes thinking to that. And IBM gets new ideas from that, as well as influencing the people who play. The IBM people are on this jam, as well as, I'd say 4 to 1, they're outsiders, maybe 5 to 1. But it's an open discussion forum organized for 2 or 3 days to discuss a topic of interest to them and accessing the minds of thousands of people around the world. And it's kind of fun. I enjoyed it. But it wasn't always thus. And I want to give you a quick history of open innovation. And what I'm going to do is spend about 10 minutes now giving you a history and a framework. And then Alf will talk about one of the most seminal cases, an invention for which he's largely responsible, of a way to do open innovation. Then we'll come back, have some discussion, and then we'll talk about another form of open innovation, collaboration between startup companies and big companies, by hearing a little bit from our startup guests. So, do you guys without cell phones use Wikipedia? Just to pick on you? Yes, okay. Everybody's familiar with Wikipedia, and it's maybe the most talked about example of open innovation. People know how it works. Every page has an owner. You decide there needs to be a page about Bank Inter. You decide you will own that page, you put up a page, and then everybody who's a member of Wikipedia says that's not a page, it's just an ad, take it down. And then you say, no, it's not an ad, look at these, and you create a robust encyclopedia entry. And as you probably know, Wikipedia is now trusted more than any printed encyclopedia, and certainly evolves faster. Just show of hands, how many people have heard of Linux in this room? Not so many. Okay, Linux in the upper left, a lot of people would say that is the beginning of the open source movement, certainly in software where it began. And Linux works kind of like Wikipedia. It is an operating system, a body of code that is contributed to by whoever wants to contribute to it. And there's a kind of referee who says this code is in or this is out, but people writing the code that they need to make Linux the software they want it to be have created Linux. Now that was 1991. Wikipedia was 10 years later, 2001. By 2014, there is an ad in Adweek, which is a journal of the advertising industry, with my top 10 global crowdsourced campaigns of 2014. And so 3 of them were Doritos, McDonald's, and Starbucks, who have contests asking their fans to suggest ads for them. Typically, it's an ad to be broadcast on the Super Bowl. Miller Beer is another one. So the advertising world is now substantially influenced by people who like a brand suggesting how that brand should represent itself to the market. And of course, engaging those customers by doing so. So that's it's gone from software, pretty geeky and arcane way of doing business, to consumer marketing. So along the way, there's a bunch of other stuff. And I'm not going to go through too many of these. I think I'll save that for the next piece. But you see Innocentive, which is the business Alf started there, and germinated in 1996 and spun out in 2001, I believe. It was quite a party you had there. That's right. It's kind of like the horse in right. There's an important book by Henry Chesbrough at the Haas School at Berkeley called Open Innovation from 2004. Wisdom of Crowds led to the idea of crowdsourcing a couple years later. Wired in 2006 coins the term crowdsourcing. Let me talk about P&G in particular. So P&G in early 2000s was saying, we're not growing enough. We're about a $40 billion company. We need about $6 billion a year of growth to make our goals. How can we generate $6 billion a year of growth? 15% of every business organically, that's pretty tough. So they said, there are a lot of businesses outside with good ideas for us. What if we develop a way of sourcing those? And I want to show you one of the people who helped develop that program, Larry Houston.
The current R&D model is not sustainable at most companies, and we interacted.
I apologize. I've got to learn how to use this clicker better. So this is Larry talking about how they proceeded.
The current R&D model is not sustainable at most companies, and we interacted with well over 20 companies on this issue. And then, but the key insight was this. We really did a lot of soul searching on how we can create value for our consumers. And what we learned was, in those rare instances where we actually found an idea outside, someone knocked in our door and finally beat their way through an outside idea that connects to our capability. Their capability married to our capability. When those connect, even we have to pay, they're about 2 times as productive in terms of return on investment. So there was the seed of an insight. We can't do everything ourselves. We've got to create $5 billion a year at least. And guess what? There's so much outside. And what we learned was that in our areas of science, I have 9,000 people. The outside world has 1.5 million people, as good as Procter people. The other thing is, they didn't believe that they were as good as them. Okay, so a lot of arrogance there. And when we looked at that, and we basically fundamentally redefined our organization is 1,509,000 people, not 9,000.
So there's an important theme, which we'll probably get to later, which is, in addition, or if you were going to be effective accessing these minds outside your business, you're going to have to overcome some organizational resistance to it and start thinking about how an organization that takes on 1.5 million people who are as smart as your 9,000 people is going to work. So, all right. Let's talk about this word open, because you saw there, I put like 20 things on that chart over the last 25 years. There are a lot of different things that we call open, and so I want to try and establish a framework. So 2 questions to focus on. The first is, how is something produced? Whether that something is an idea or a design or a product. Is it produced internally by a company's own people? Is it co-developed with customers, co-created? Or is it crowdsourced from the world at large, like the ideas in the IBM Jam? So how is it produced is one question. And who owns it? Who has the right to use it is the second question. Is it proprietary only for your company? Is it a so-called work for hire, meaning hired from a contractor, but the contractor retains no rights to it? Is it used in a way that the interface is open, but you don't have any rights to it? And I'll explain that case in detail in a minute. Or is it so-called open source, meaning anyone can use it, like Linux or like Wikipedia? available to everybody who's interested. So if you look at those two things, here the classic case is proprietary development, internal development for proprietary use. So the formula for Coca-Cola, you know, if I tell you I have to shoot you because it's a closely held secret, and nobody gets to make that formula except Coca-Cola bottlers, right? So that's the traditional world down in the lower left. And Wikipedia, which I discussed before, is both crowdsourced and open source. So that's the complete execution of open innovation. Is that making sense so far? Happy to make this as interactive, make this an open conversation. Okay, so let's talk about Creative Commons for a minute. Creative Commons is an alternative to the normal copyright license. So in a normal copyright, you wrote something. If you want to publish it, you have to get, if I want to publish it, I have to pay you. In the Creative Commons world, you write something and you declare that it is under a Creative Commons license, and that means anybody can publish it as long as they attribute it to you. So you do ask recognition and a proprietary interest in it, but no compensation. So Creative Commons has literary contributions, but also science contributions. And in fact, IBM took a portfolio of patents that they felt were not useful to it, but might be useful to the world at large, and essentially published them as a Creative Commons license in the public domain. And the remaining corner are prizes. So has anyone heard of the X Prize? Is that? In 96, an organization posted $1 million prize for the development of the private development of a plane that would go into space and return. And it took 7 or 8 years before that prize was claimed. The people who did it said that they did it so that people would do the research to develop this technology, which in that case became public. So they say that there was $6 million worth of research was done by people all over the world by offering this $1 million prize. So that's one model, and now the X Prize results tend to be proprietary. People offer prizes to get research into property that they will keep. Goldcorp is a narrower version of it. Goldcorp is in the gold mining business, and they recognized what Larry Houston recognized. There are a lot of smart people out there, a lot more geologists than work for Goldcorp. And so they did the following thing. They took a lot of geology data that they had, relevant to where you would find gold, and they put their data out and said to geologists or anybody else who wanted to analyze the data, if you can find a better algorithm for finding gold with this data we have, we will reward you. And indeed, they made a lot of money, and they gave away a lot of money in that prize. And that's been copied many times since. So in addition, P&G I've mentioned. IBM, in addition to giving away a patent portfolio, had this kind of jam that I mentioned. The open interface, the best known example, is the App Store. So Apple is responsible for making the App Store, but they are crowdsourcing the apps. Anyone can write an app and send it to the App Store. So that's been a huge success. And I'll more or less finish with another story about Microsoft, because Bill Joy was giving Microsoft a hard time for being a closed system. Any of you have Xbox 360s? Yeah, there's at least one. No mobile phone, but an Xbox. All right. Yeah. What you see there is called the Kinect. The Kinect attaches to the Xbox 360, and it senses the game player. So if you say to the Xbox, serve the ball, and on the screen, the ball is served, and you do that, and it sees you swing, and it puts a virtual tennis racket in your hand. When it was released with great fanfare, the woman on the right her title is Lady Ada, after Ada Byron. But she's a champion of the maker movement, which are hackers for things. And she published, she said she would pay $1,000 for the first person to put online a hack that would get the data out of the Kinect and make it available to other applications besides Microsoft games. So note, that's a use of the open source prize to get this hack. So Microsoft, in its previous mindset, said what? They said, well, anybody misusing our proprietary technology, we will pursue to the full extent of the law. So Lady Ada increases the reward from $1,000 to $2,000. And within 48 hours, there is a piece of software to get that data out. And within 2 weeks, there was a website called Kinect Hacks, full of brilliant applications using the Kinect to capture choreography, to develop cartoons, to read x-rays, doing all kinds of great things and making them available on an open source basis. And here's the cool thing. The cool thing is that Microsoft looked at this and said, huh, maybe we can sell more of these things if we make it an open interface. Because we were never going to sell it to choreographers before, and now, or music conductors, and now we are. So they made it an open interface like an app store. And they, in fact, started putting that interface into Windows, starting with Windows 8. So Microsoft, which we painted as the villain in the first slide, has adopted open innovation as part of the way they move forward. So the last one I want to talk about, I'm going to skip C-Click-Fix, which is open source governmental response. You report a pothole or a lamppost that's out to the city. But let's move to Innocentive, which is a business that Alf created. I think I'll just say that it originally took engineering problems that there was no capacity to solve and put them out in public where people who could solve them could volunteer their solutions and make money doing it. And the story of how that happened and what has happened since, I will leave to Alf. Go for it.
Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.